Politics has always been a passionate subject, and we've always had deep political disagreements. That's the way it's supposed to be. But we've gotten to the point where people can't even talk to one another. Americans no longer see their political opponents as simply wrong or misguided. They see them as bad people whose ways of thinking are dangerous and incomprehensible. They see them as enemies. This level of rancor and mistrust threatens our democracy, and it makes it harder for us to move forward as a nation, regardless of who the president is.
The fact that we live in what feels like, some people call it a cold civil war, that takes a toll on all of us.
We've been excommunicated from a lot of our friends in the last couple of years, and it makes me sad.
This is one organization that's doing a lot to kind of overcome that and get people back to where we were, which is neighbors, friends, communities.
Better Angels was born in response to the crisis of polarization. We are truly bipartisan. From our staff to our funding to our board of directors, we're evenly split, half conservative, half liberal. Everything we do comes from the bottom up. We're an almost entirely volunteer-led operation. We wanted to see, could we get together a group of folks who'd voted for Trump and a group of folks who'd voted for Clinton and get them in a room together to see how can we bring people together to not get them to agree or to come to the middle, but to maybe change how they think about one another.
You know, it's funny, I think a lot of people would look at 2020 and argue that this is the least hospitable time for the work that we're doing because we know that our politics has a tendency to bring out the worst in us. But it also is an extraordinary opportunity because this deeper project of civic renewal, of healing the relationships that exist between the American people across the cultural and political divides, the importance of this project is going to become clearer and clearer to people over the course of this election.
A lot of people are going to have to let off steam. I really believe that it's better to do it in a productive way, where they see each other as fellow human beings. It inspires me. Every Better Angels debate I take part in.
Hello, welcome to InSight. I'm Wendy Brokaw, and today we have a fascinating topic, bridging the partisan divide. Can it be done during our current political climate, or is it a bridge too far? Well, Braver Angels says that it can be done, and they're doing it, what's more. Would you please welcome my guests, Jeff Spitzer and Elise Keith, Braver Angels Oregon Red and Blue coordinators. Thank you for joining me. I've been wanting to talk to you because as soon as I learned there was an organization out there, a national nonprofit, that actually for the last, 7 or so years have been bridging political divides, my gosh, what an achievement. What's their story?
Well, that's why we're here.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us. It's exciting to get to share, for sure.
Well, who is Braver Angels?
So Braver Angels was started just after the 2016 election. And this idea that came out of marriage counseling of all places to bring the two sides who seemed like they hated each other together to better understand each other. And what they did is they held their very first workshop and they brought 8 people, I believe, who voted for Hillary Clinton and 8 who voted for Trump, and they brought them together for a weekend with structured conversations and exercises, and that became the birth of Braver Angels.
What happened out of that meeting that made it say, wait a minute, we could do this across the country?
So like many of the workshops that have been held since, people walk in sometimes really reluctant to walk into the room, sometimes quite clear based on what they see in the parking lot that there are people in that room that they do not like, right? That's a Trump sticker, that's a Prius, whatever it is. And they walk out exchanging phone numbers and hugs and keeping in touch and building real friendships over time. So that happened with the first workshop, and it's something that we've then replicated across the country many times over.
What attracted each of you to Braver Angels to have a part in it? Jeff?
Boy, I wanted to do something about this divide for a very long time. I could remember a time not so long ago, it seems like a million years ago now, but when you could be friends with somebody who thought different than you, when it didn't matter, when you didn't know and didn't care how your friends and family voted. And it would only be around election time that my friends on Facebook would get, they would pipe up and get all finger pointy about all the things that were wrong with the people who thought differently than them, and then it would simmer down. But around, mid 2010s, 2015, 2016, it was like all year long. And I wanted to do something about it, but I just sort of put it aside because I didn't know. And then summer of 2020, if anybody remembers how tumultuous that summer was, especially here in Oregon, it got me off the sidelines. I'd long believed that the biggest issue was that the two sides didn't talk to each other anymore. People didn't talk with people who thought differently than them. They just stayed behind a screen, got on their soapbox and said everything that's wrong in the world and all the things that the other side were doing wrong, and that's no way to get anything done. So believing that the core of the issue is that people didn't understand each other, I wanted to get involved with an organization that brought people together to better understand each other. I went searching for that, found Braver Angels, and I got involved that very same day.
Oh, thank you. Elise, how about you?
Well, similarly, I got involved about the same time, but for me, I saw that divide up close and personal. So I have family who've been in Oregon for 100 years, and we have farmer families that were Trump voters, and we have activist families that were absolutely 100% not, that used to come together for the holidays, that used to come together for the football games and all of these things. And around the 2020 time, especially as COVID hit, and especially as all of the rancor about that issue came to play, my family became a family that no longer was able to sit together. They started to see each other not as people with differences, but as people with dangerous agendas who they needed to then treat as the enemy. It was no longer safe to just be with somebody who was different from you. And that's devastating. It's just devastating to families, and it's certainly devastating to our communities. So I got involved. Jeff actually interviewed me to help out pushing buttons on Zoom because we were doing all of our work online at the time, and have since stayed involved and helped bring families and people in neighborhoods back together.
You notice that I said you were red and blue, not Democrat, Republican. Tell me, what's the story behind that?
The lines are not that clearly drawn between Democrat and Republican. There's a lot of people who, like myself, I used to be a registered Republican, but I'm no longer. Around 2012, I believed that the party did not align with my values anymore, but I'm still conservative. I still lean conservative. I still generally vote Republican in elections, but I don't identify with the Republican Party. So what Braver Angels, they identify as red and blue, conservative and liberal, because this divide is beyond Democrat, Republican. It's really conservatives and liberals.
What did Braver Angels want to accomplish with people over the last 7 years? What was their mission?
So our mission, it may seem like the mission is about, these people who see each other as enemies, helping them change their minds about their views so that they can work together. But that's not it at all. The mission is really about helping people see each other as people again. It's about combating what we call effective polarization. And it's the kind of polarization where we get to treat each other as the other, as opposed to our neighbors, our friends, our fellow citizens that we share a destiny with and need to understand so that we can work together.
We watch football and sports together, and we don't ask each other what party you're from or what your views are. You're enjoying supporting your kids in school, for example. But somehow politics and partisanship has become a watchword, putting a lid on that kind of natural, spontaneous getting along together as fellow Americans. Braver Angels on its website, and we'll get into that in a minute, thinks of this as a real threat to democracy, to our nation. Do you see it that way? And if so, why?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we live in Oregon, and we have had school boards ripped apart. based on political divides. Right? These are people coming together to support their children, getting an education, which we had built in as a right in this country, and they're fighting over things that have been politicized and polarized in the media and by the parties, and their kids are suffering for it. We have citizens who no longer believe it's possible that if either of the current candidates wins the next election, that will be the signal for the uprising, right? And this is a story we heard over and over again from people. We did a week at the state fair this last year, and we got 3 reactions. One was, oh, we're so glad you're doing this. I love that you're involved. We want to be a part of it. One of them was, nope, I don't do politics. And the other one was, no, I've got my guns, I've got my supplies, I'm ready, because it's not solvable. And I heard more of that than I really think I should have.
Yeah.
That was terrifying. People should not be afraid of each other in that way in our country. So that's our mission.
Yeah. I'll just add that at every level of government, it seems like our elected officials can't seem to get along. They can't seem to find common ground and work through things, and it just results in gridlock. And that's no way to run a country. And that's not an example. Most Americans now have no faith in their elected officials.
Right. Trust in government, trust in institutions in general is at an all-time historical low in this country. And yet we are the people who make up many of those institutions, the school boards, the city councils, and all the way on up. So if we create an environment where there is an expectation that we will be different and yet work together civilly, that is something that can, in fact, infect our politics, right? People want to get elected based on what the people want. And if what the people demand is civility, well, that would be kind of cool.
Let's talk about how it works in real. Walk us through what happens at a Braver Angels meeting. How often do you hold them, and under what circumstances, and what kinds of things? I can just see all kinds of things would happen.
Well, Braver Angels is structured into what we call alliances all over the country. That's like a chapter in another organization. We call them alliances because they're all led by a red and a blue co-chair. So Elise and I are here today as a red and a blue leading the statewide alliance in Oregon. And so there's few over 100, I believe.
104, I think?
Something
or
like that around the country, in almost every state. And they do a variety of different things. They do everything from, well, oftentimes our first introduction is giving a presentation to a group or an organization about who Braver Angels is, what we do, and how we do it. Then we have everything from debates to workshops to like one-on-one conversations, group conversations. We have, what am I forgetting here? Book club, film club, things where people get together and they talk about how their own views about something that might seem polarizing, but with the structure that Braver Angels brings to those conversations, it helps keep things on the rails.
And music is a key component.
Music, we do have a music part of Braver Angels as well, and in fact, the director of that lives in Oregon.
Oh, really? Yeah. Why music? As if I need to ask.
Because music brings people together, right? You get a song in your heart. So the organization's work, as Jeff was saying, is very much about helping each of us as individuals have the skills and an experience of having talked to somebody who was different from us and finding that experience, maybe not comfortable. Maybe we don't agree, but it's okay. It's something I can do again. It's something I may want to do again. And then, after the work that Braver Angels sets in place, it's very much like fertile ground for then future collaboration. So we do have some alliances who, they do the workshops and the skill building and they meet, and then they look in their communities and they say, there are things that have been stuck here that we want to get done and that have been caught in this political back and forth. But maybe together we can solve them. And they make real change happen because they have that foundation of cooperation in place.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, so in the Civic Renewal program, they publish examples online. One town had an ongoing fight about their stop sign and whether to have a stop sign in the town and where to put it and how to do it. And, decade-long battle was then resolved by the Braver Angels team. Another team in California figured out how to address their homeless problem.
Oh, that's amazing, because as you know, here in Oregon, that has been front and center as a community way to resolve. But at the same time, of course, there are great differences about how to go about that.
Huge differences, not easy in any way. I mean, everybody on both sides is clear that that's not got a simple answers, but that answers need to be had. And that community found them.
Jeff, what is the Braver Angels approach to these, getting a community, for example, that is interested in being helped with your help? What's key to making it work with these people so that the community does resolve that thorny issues that's had them deadlocked?
What we're really trying to achieve with all of our events, whether they're a conversation, a workshop, a debate, is bringing understanding. So some of our workshops are skill building workshops, as Elise said. So we teach communication skills, helping people learn to communicate, to be heard, and to listen to the other side rather than just jump in and tell them that they're wrong. So listen with curiosity. And when you start to get curious, you can understand where someone's coming from. And if you understand them, you might not agree with them. In fact, you might disagree, but at least you can understand where they're coming from and start to see them as human beings again. And we start to humanize each other again, then we can start to work together. And I think that's the fertile ground that Elise was just alluding to, that we create with the work that we do that allows us to be able to help move some of these initiatives forward.
And then when you've got that ground and you're hearing each other, right? Jeff and I don't agree on many things, but we've heard each other often enough that we know where we do agree, and we can work together on those things.
Yeah.
And on the places where we don't agree, we can respect that, that we're going to be different.
And how do you help in that area with the use of just getting people to re-examine what they didn't maybe know was interfering with their ability to get along with the quote-unquote other side, the others?
I'll mention one thing and then you can add. One of our workshops is called Depolarizing Within. And it's one of our skill workshops, but it's designed to help people look internally and understand where they might be polarized right now. And it's an hour and a half, 2-hour workshop, and you start to see like how you're contributing to the problem where you didn't even realize, how you're talking with your friends, your like-minded friends and family about the other side, demonizing the other side, which is just adding to the polarization. So when you get people to start to realize like what they're doing that's contributing themselves, we also teach them how to change that, how to shift out of that. When they find themselves caught in a conversation like that, how to pivot out of it, and how to help the person that you're talking with that you might have always gone on and just kept berating the other side. But you know what? I learned something recently about what the other side thinks on that topic. Is it okay if I share? And of course, generally you gain the person's curiosity. They're like, they couldn't possibly have anything good to say. Yes, tell me, And so you start to learn how to pivot out of that, but it all starts with ourselves.
Is there a comfort in demonizing the other side and a great discomfort looking at it any other way?
Sure, absolutely, right? Like if you have a clear enemy and you've got friends around you that also have a clear enemy and you share that enemy, boy, are you part of a group or what? right? You belong. It's very, I mean, it's hard to do this work. We're called Braver Angels for a reason, right? So, you know, Jeff leans conservative, I lean liberal, and people see us working together as going over to the dark side sometimes. So certainly it can feel safer not to do that. But in terms of combating what you experience on social media, some of it is understanding that dynamic in yourself, right? That rush of pleasure you might get when you notice how dumb the people on the other side are being. Some of it is learning more about how the media works. So we partner with folks like All Sides and other outlets that seek to educate the populace on how to detect media bias and how to see the same story told 4 or 5 different ways based on the slant, which is fascinating.
From your perspective, can you tell me what effect that has on people introduced to that idea for the first time and seeing it in operation? How to detect different ways a story is being told?
So we actually partnered with a class at Lewis and Clark, and we did a unit on how to detect media bias with students in their freshman years. And they were stunned. They were stunned when they first encountered it to realize how much they had bought into one side of the story.
Yeah.
And had never even realized that the other side was there and had no awareness of how slanted the news that they were getting was.
Right. Do they end up feeling manipulated as a result? Like, I didn't think that through, but I think I've been had.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe a
I'm just
little
wondering.
Bit. Well, it's a real challenge, right? Because you have an identity based on, like, I believe these things and those people are ruining our country and I need to stand up for and against, you know, that kind of stuff. And then when you realize your identity is built on something that isn't entirely, well, not representative of the whole story, at the very least, that can be a challenge.
Being honest about it, are they then attracted to trying to pursue the facts of any particular issue, or do they revert back to their group set ideas about things? I mean, that sounds like something really hard to overcome.
It's a mix.
It's a mix. You know, not everybody is going to have that experience and then say, well, now I'm changed.
Yeah, that would be sweet.
Yeah, it would be
that
great.
Would be wicked sweet, but it does not happen.
No, it doesn't happen. Some people still get sucked in. Some people, like Elise just said, where we get, you know, like accused of, you know, like betraying our side by working together on this issue. Some people get sucked right back into that. You know, they can't handle that sort of pressure and they like fall back into their group.
Right, which is why it's important that we keep doing trying to make inroads, because it's not yet safe for many people to feel like they can work together.
Right.
And that is, in fact, the whole problem. I think about that Lewis and Clark group, and the last time we worked with them, the students wanted to host one of our workshops on a topic that they were passionate about, that they felt they didn't have the facts on. So to get to your question about, like, does it inspire people to go after the facts? Lewis and Clark is very heavily blue. You know, very few conservative opinions expressed in their class. So they wanted to host what we call a common ground workshop, where you bring people on 2 sides of an issue together to say, okay, we absolutely disagree on this issue, but is there some part of it that maybe we can find common ground on? And so they did a workshop on abortion. And we brought together pro-life and pro-choice people. At the end of the workshop, they had a list of 40 points of agreement. And the thing
Wait a minute, say that again, a list of 40?
Yeah, it was
40?
like over 80% of the statements that they had come up with, there was agreement on. Yeah, it was pretty fascinating.
Wow.
And then at the very end, both a pro-choice and a pro-life person talked about what they had learned And they had learned some things about the nuances of each other's perspectives. But the thing that struck me most deeply was they both said, I learned that the other side cares about women and children.
Interesting.
What? Like, how did you believe that they didn't care about women and children? And yet they did. They both thought people holding the view that was different from theirs literally hated women and children.
That they were just evil.
Yeah. So people do change.
What do you think the future holds for Braver Angels?
Well, it's going to be a
What would
busy
you like
year.
to see? What would you like? Where do you think you're going, and what do you think you could accomplish?
If we can get through this election cycle this year, I think the sky is the limit, because the change that we see in people in our events, when they come into our events, like maybe being dragged to one by their spouse, skeptical, not thinking it's possible, thinking I have nothing in common with these people on the other side, only to see them making friends and hugging and exchanging contact information before they leave. That's why we keep doing it, and I think that's what the future holds for us. So reaching all parts of the country, everybody, one person at a time. I mean, that's why I keep doing this work, and that's certainly what I hope the future holds, is a lot more of that.
Yeah, and this year specifically, the organization has a lot of focus on working with our legislators, working with our government. So we have a program called Braver Politics that helps elected officials have more respectful conversations with constituents and host debates with each other that are civil. And if you haven't seen a Braver Angels debate, I encourage you to go to our YouTube website and see these. They are remarkable. It's part of what got me involved.
Where could that lead, I wonder? That sounds fascinating. Civil discourse. A few stories, if you can, what people have told you, how it's made a difference in their lives. I'm sure you have some.
Yes. One fun story that comes to mind. I'm stealing this one from you because you like to tell it all the time.
It's like, are you going to tell my story?
Yeah, I am. No, okay, you tell it.
Please
You tell
don't.
it. You tell it.
No, I want to hear it from your perspective.
We were invited to give a presentation to a local group in Portland. I don't know if I should name them. Maybe I won't name them.
Oh.
Should
I was
name
thinking
them?
of a different story. No, yeah, please, go ahead.
And they were very passionate about their side of issues, and they would go out like in parades and things, dressed up and holding signs and singing songs that were very demonizing of the other side. And they didn't really realize that that's the case. And after working with us, we did a presentation and a small workshop for them. They were like, holy cow, we see how we're contributing, and we need to change the lyrics of our songs.
Right. Very angry activist organization was going to go back and rewrite all their stuff because, hard to bring more people under your tent if you're yelling at them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you don't have to shout always to be heard.
So if you weren't going to tell that story, what story were you going to tell?
Well, we did a workshop. We did I think it was a red-blue workshop where we got people from both sides together to learn about how they see each other and what's true about it and what isn't. And we had a couple of people who were attending because they were getting ready to run for office. And they wanted to be informed about what people on the other side said about the positions they were going to run on. And we had this one woman run, and she, at the end of it, said, I have to change my campaign. I've been running as if these people are stupid and they're the enemy, as opposed to people who have different concerns that I wasn't paying attention to.
On that note, I think we'll leave our viewers asking, how do we get in touch with you?
The website is the best place. braverangels.org is the national website, braverangels.org/Oregon. You can see what we're doing in Oregon, get in contact with Elise and I.
Well, Jeff Spitzer and Elise, Keith, I can't thank you enough. This has been an enlightening conversation. And thank you for joining us today on InSight. I'm Wendy Brokaw. We'll see you next time.